Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news here in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what here in the Holy Land, well, have no worries. I'm Tracy Alexander and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
Now, it could be seen as a day of celebration with the holiday feel in the air, and not only because of tomorrow's looming Shavuot holiday. No, today is restaurant owners and culinary lovers' time to celebrate, Merav Savir reports.
The streets of Tel Aviv have been filling up quickly over the last few weeks as the country emerges from quarantine. But today, things are starting to feel a lot more like the normal we were once used to.
Today, bars, restaurants, and cafes all over Israel, just like this one, Java and Tel Aviv, are dusting off their tables and chairs and welcoming diners for the first time in over 10 weeks of only having takeaway and delivery.
It didn't take long for hungry diners to return to their favorite spots, and for the smiles to return to the faces of those who work in the industry, even if they're hidden behind masks.
האמת, כיף לראות אנשים, הרבה שולחנות, קצת תנועה, התגעגענו לזה, וזהו, התגעגענו ללקוחות, זה בית קפה שכונתי, ואנחנו מאוד מחוברים עם הלקוחות.
וואי, התרגשות, היינו פה אתמול כל היום, ניקינו עד ממש השעות הקטנות של הלילה. לא ישנתי בלילה מרוב התרגשות.
And people are eager to come back, rushing to book tables at their favorite restaurants and get some fresh air at their usual coffee place.
אני חושבת שהיה נורא חסר ההתאווררות, היציאה, המפגש החברתי, זה דבר שהוא נורא חשוב.
Of course, in this new reality, there are regulations that eateries and bars must follow. Customers will have their temperature checked before sitting down. There must be 1.5 meters between tables, and tables will be set only after the customer takes a seat. And anything non-disposable, like tables, chairs, and salt and pepper shakers, will be disinfected between diners. And there must be antibacterial gel available. As for the number of people allowed, restaurants with a maximum capacity of 100 diners can operate at full capacity. Any restaurant which can fit more than 100 customers can operate at only 85%. But residents of Tel Aviv don't seem to mind and aren't concerned about going out, even with the possibility of a second wave.
זה לא עבר, לא חושבים על זה בכלל, אבל זה כן אני מרגישה שזה ירד, קצת הבעלה, קצת הדאגה.
As for bars and pubs, for some people like Gili, it may take a bit more time until they're ready to go out and grab a beer.
לא יודעת, אני מפחדת קצת מהאטרף שיהיה בחוץ, אבל אני מאמינה שלאט לאט אני גם לזה אחזור, אבל כן, חלום, זה השאיפה.
All right, and now, today in Israeli politics, a landmark vote taking center stage in the Knesset. The so-called Norwegian Law is advancing to its second reading, and the controversial expanded Norwegian Law is returning to the agenda after originally being postponed last week. The bill has passed its first reading today.
הרבה מאוד מילים נשפכו, חלקן מדויקות יותר, חלקן מדויקות פחות, על החוק הנורווגי בניסוחו הראשון, בניסוחו החדש. בכל אופן נראה לי שברור שככל שהזמן עובר אנחנו מבינים שהחוק הזה יש לו תכלית אחת מהותית, והיא לחזק את משכן הכנסת.
Now, it's named after a similar law in Norway, and if passed, it will let ministers within the coalition keep their ministerial positions, but while handing over their Knesset seat to the next in line. This would cause the number of people in the government to grow, though. And one issue attached to it passing, though, is that the Israeli Basic Law, kind of like the United States Constitution, limits the size of the government to 120 seats. So, the High Court is staunchly against the bill. Critics are also speaking out against the cost, saying that the already massive new government would have to shell out an additional 1.5 million shekels for each and every newly promoted legislator.
Well, to politics now, old alliances are turning sour in the Knesset as the right-wing Yamina party looks to undermine the new government, taking aim at leading Prime Minister Netanyahu through his landmark corruption trial. Aaron Porras has the details.
He may look happy and civilized here, but hell hath no fury like a politician scorned. Right-wing Yamina party chairman and former defense minister Naftali Bennett is now trying to divide the fledgling unity government by introducing a new bill taking aim at the coalition's weak spot, leading Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's legal woes. The new law, dubbed the French law because of its similarities to legislation in France, would prevent the prosecution of a sitting prime minister except for in serious cases. Yamina is arguing that the law would prevent situations like this, where a sitting Israeli leader has to split their time between court and leading the country. The so-called Israeli French law wouldn't help Netanyahu with his current trial, though. It would only protect him from future investigations. For example, Case 3000 or the so-called submarine affair, which falls into that category, in that Netanyahu is a person of interest. For months, new defense minister and co-prime minister Benny Gantz has been rallying against the French law, though. And while the new unity government has agreed to not push any bills unrelated to coronavirus for at least 6 months, there's nothing stopping them from voting on such a bill if it's introduced by the opposition. As it stands, the Likud and the blue and white parties under Netanyahu and Gantz respectively are expected to vote in opposite directions.
All right, moving on now, the controversial topic of annexing Jewish settlements again taking centre stage, this time at the ruling Likud party's weekly meeting.
יש כאן הזדמנות היסטורית שלא הייתה מאז 1948, להחיל ריבונות באופן מושכל כצעד מדיני וצעד ריבוני של מדינת ישראל ביהודה ושומרון. זאת הזדמנות גדולה ואנחנו לא ניתן לה לחלוף.
Netanyahu's steadfast, setting a July date for the vote, saying he has no intention of changing it. But the idea of carrying out this move unilaterally is already dividing the newly founded coalition. Labour Party Member of Parliament and Welfare Minister Itzik Shmuley, for one, is vowing to vote against it. The planned move is in line with United States President Donald Trump's proposed peace initiative, which allows for Israel to extend its sovereignty across up to 30% of Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. Well, perhaps it's a good thing the entire courtroom was in masks for the jaws that likely hit the floor. It's a scene many doubted would come to pass, Israel's first sitting Prime Minister to sit trial in a criminal case, and the jury is certainly not out on whether the entire ordeal is a witch hunt or whether there's cause for these unprecedented hearings. Aaron Porras brings us up to speed.
Supporters waving and chanting as his motorcade drives off, the first day of lead Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trial is over, and it may be months or longer before he returns to court. After Israelis witnessed this historic spectacle, the country's first criminal trial against a sitting prime minister. The judges saying he may not need to come back to court for now because the next few steps are mainly procedural. The prime ministers pleading not guilty to a host of corruption charges. Netanyahu is indicted on 3 counts each of fraud and breach of trust and 1 count of bribery across 3 criminal cases. And in total, he could face over 20 years in prison or a fine if found guilty. Meanwhile, rushing to trial Sunday directly from the new cabinet's first weekly meeting, Netanyahu addressing the press, saying he wants the whole trial broadcast live.
ולכן הבקשה הראשונה שלי מבית המשפט היא שקיפות מלאה. אני מבקש שהכל ישודר בשידור חי. שידור רציף ולא מצונזר.
The next hearing is scheduled for June 19, at which point the prosecution and defense will update the judges on their progress reviewing the materials of this case.
Incendiary and explosive balloons from Gaza are once again being launched towards Israeli communities. At least 3 waves of the dangerous tactic reported over the past 24 hours, with terror groups in the Strip threatening to turn Gaza into hell if Israel fails to send medical supplies for coronavirus into the enclave within 72 hours. It comes just days after Hamas announced the first COVID-related death in the Strip, and this comes after multiple attempted stabbing attacks in the West Bank.
Reports of terror again gripping the nation. An Israeli policeman attacked in an attempted stabbing attack in East Jerusalem's Jabal Mukaber neighborhood. The Palestinian assailant, armed with a knife and tear gas, screaming Allahu Akbar, or God is great, as he approached security forces Monday evening. Police responding by opening fire and wounding the suspect, who was later taken to hospital. This, the second attack in one day. Hours earlier, reports of an attempted stabbing in the West Bank. A group of soldiers shooting and wounding the 2 Palestinian suspects. Locals insisting, though, that the shootings were unprovoked. Speaking with the Times of Israel, a resident of a nearby Palestinian village, saying that the 2 suspects are brothers who were tending to their farm when a group of settlers and soldiers allegedly ordered them to leave. It's at this point that the IDF reportedly shot and wounded the 2.
Well, briefly now, accused pedophile Malka Leifer has today been deemed mentally fit to stand trial. The decision, ruled in Jerusalem court today, renews a stalled extradition process to Australia. Now, Leifer fled to Israel in 2008 after being indicted in Australia on 74 counts of rape and sexual assault against 3 sisters who were students at a Jewish school in the city of Melbourne, where she served as headmistress. She was found by Israeli police in 2014 and has since claimed she is mentally unfit to stand trial. Now, Israeli woman Nicole Sela should have turned 33 years old last week. Instead, today, the man that was her husband before her death is on trial for her murder, today pleading not guilty in court. Nicole was brutally murdered in her own home in the presence of her baby daughter in October 2019. Jerusalem prosecutors last November charging her husband Eliran Malul with aggravated murder. He's accused of stabbing Michal 11 times in her upper body. Michal's sister Lily Ben Ami has founded the Nicole Sela Forum in her honour, this past week presenting an award to the winner of a hackathon launched to ensure that Michal's death would not be in vain. Among the big names like Google, Wix and Waze sponsoring the event was Facebook, who told us earlier why they wanted to get behind it.
As soon as Facebook heard about the Safe at Home hackathon sponsored by the Nicole Sela Forum, we jumped on board to help in whatever way that we could. We were inspired by Lily Ben Ami's passion and vision to use technology to find solutions to prevent domestic violence. At Facebook, we also believed that without support for the winning ideas, they would have little chance to become successful. And that is why we were honored to be able to contribute 33,000 shekel for the first prize in honor of what should have been Nicole Sela's 33rd birthday. We hope that this will help the idea to become successful and to save lives.
Well, in other news, sports turned political with an athletic trade sparking outcry from Palestinian fans. Arab-Israeli soccer star Abdullah Jabbar has been fired from the Palestinian national team after he signed with a club from the Israeli National League for next season. Now, the balancing act is difficult for the 27-year-old who comes from the Israeli city of Taiba. He says that by many Palestinian supporters he's too Israeli, while in Israel he's seen by many as not Israeli enough. Jabbar has been playing for the Palestinian team for over half a decade. He's won awards and represented the team internationally in over 50 games, including in the World Cup. Still, with the news of his return to the Israeli National League, he says he's received streams of hate messages on social media. Well, as coronavirus restrictions ease in the Holy Land, holy sites are beginning to reopen. But today, worshippers were left disappointed after a last-minute decision to keep the doors of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre closed a little longer. And this is not what they were told. So I went along to see how it unfolded. Take a look. Exclusive entry only to a select few. This masked monk, one of the lucky ones allowed in, as a priestly procession is ushered out of the holy doors. The rest left outside to take a quick selfie or two. The doors, though, sealed shut to the public. Well, it's not what was expected. Worshippers that turned up here expecting to go inside today have been told the doors aren't going to be open until next week, and that's hopefully next week. Worshippers have been pressing their hands up against the wooden structures, trying to get as close as possible to the holy site. Now, this has become a common image outside the church during the coronavirus pandemic, once the lockdown was over and believers could once again visit the old city's holy structures. Now, it's a place that really needs no explanation. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is where Christians believe Jesus was crucified, buried and resurrected. The doors opening every half an hour to monks and priests from the Assyrian, Coptic, Catholic, Greek Orthodox and Armenian faiths, as members of the public huddled around the entrance, hoping to get a peek inside. Strict hygiene measures are still in place, people wearing their masks even outside to protect themselves and others from contracting the coronavirus. And when these doors do open next week, that will in fact continue. Only 50 people will be allowed to enter at a time. We're expecting very long lines, and they'll need to socially distance, continue to wear their masks, and there'll be no kissing of stones and religious structures. Now, while the site is beloved by those of the Christian faiths, with such a significant history, it attracts people from all backgrounds. Local tour groups are once again coming just to learn about the Christian Quarter, singing songs of peace today. Those the hopes of everyone who will no doubt be crowding this amphitheatre come Sunday. Now, in other news, while select nations are preparing to reopen their borders for Israeli tourists, well, one South American country is orchestrating a visit with a very different purpose. And the fates of thousands, if not millions, of cows are resting on the outcome. Aaron Porras has the story.
Amidst one of the toughest travel bans on earth due to the coronavirus, a group of Israeli rabbis are taking to the skies on their way to Argentina. But not for some vacation. Argentinian beef exports have been slowed to a crawl, especially with the EU and China. But Israel, Argentina's third largest client, is still open for imports, provided the beef is properly blessed and kosher. So putting together a special flight, the rabbinical travelers leaving Israel for a tour of Argentina's meat-packing plants.
Siempre vienen los rabinos a fiscalizar, pero vienen por las líneas aéreas comerciales normales. Al estar paralizado todo este sistema de vuelos a nivel internacional, la única alternativa es poder tratar de implementar este charter en combinación con los clientes de Israel, supervisado, autorizado y coordinado por los gobiernos de Argentina e Israel en esta oportunidad.
Now, under normal circumstances, the Israeli rabbinate requires an Israeli team to certify kosher imports anyway, and a team typically comes to inspect at least twice a year. But this trip is especially important amidst a current lack of certified rabbis for local and other kosher markets too.
All right, well, have you ever tried to buy clothes online but aren't sure how the sizes will fit your body, or perhaps the models that the retailer uses don't quite reflect how you look? Well, an Israeli tech company has created a solution that British fashion retailer ASOS has started using. Brands like Adidas and Bloomingdale's are reportedly next to follow suit. It's an augmented program developed by Israel's ZKit to show customers how each item looks on 16 models, not avatars of different shapes, ages and ethnicities. Now, when the coronavirus restrictions prevented models from coming into the ASOS studios, well, that's when the company contacted the Israeli AR company, saying it became a useful solution not only for customers, but also protecting their models and staff. Well, I know that I use many of these applications and arguably spend way too much time on them for work and personal use. But apparently, every time we log on to these social media tools, we could be opening ourselves up to certain exploitations we're not even aware of. Aaron Porras explains.
Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. These are just 3 of the dozens of social media platforms we use every day without thinking twice. But how much do these programs use or even abuse our trust? And is there anything we can do about it? Well, Israeli company CRT, or Cyber Right Tech, says yes. But first, let's go back to those terms and conditions that you had to sign before logging into these platforms for the first time, because you may have signed away more than you bargained for. And now your privacy or even your human rights may have been violated without you or even the social media companies knowing it. This issue, especially getting the spotlight in the wake of Israel's NSO group's involvement in the tracking of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, or Israel's surveillance of citizens in quarantine with coronavirus. So what's the solution? Well, for some, like Facebook, the answer lies in a $130 million oversight committee. For everyone else, now there's CRT. Developed by former officials from the Israeli State Comptroller, CRT has developed a conduct code that analyzes programs and even user agreements or contracts for risks of rights infringements. And the code is based on non-binding guidelines from the EU, the OECD, and the United Nations. Eventually, CRT hopes to establish a global standard based on these guidelines, and which is enforced with human rights quality seals awarded by their company.
And now we turn to a very special coronavirus message from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but you've never heard the Israeli leader's words quite like this. Tracy Alexander has the details.
אהבה זה ריחוק, ריחוק מבני המשפחה. אהבה זה ריחוק, ריחוק מכל מה ששלך.
Mashups of sound bites from a country's leader doesn't have to be cruel. It can be done affectionately just to make the public laugh. And as coronavirus weighs heavy on the population, some are trying to find some humour in a difficult situation, using speeches by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
אני רואה משפחות, בני משפחה, יושבים על כורסה אחת, כמעט אחד על השני. זה לא משחק ילדים, זה חיים ומוות.
Lior Ashkenazi and Daniel Solomon are two prominent Israeli artists, and they've made this song, composed entirely of COVID-19 addresses by the Premier. The song's title makes fun of the required 2 meters of personal space between people during the pandemic, called Distancing is Love, referring to Netanyahu's March 17 speech when the world was only just recognizing the extent of the global threat.
היום אני יכול להגיד, אהבה זה ריחוק.
Ashkenazi is calling the new song a coronavirus graduation party as restrictions now ease. While Israeli humour is laced with cynicism, Ashkenazi assures the public that this song is meant in jest.
אני שומע אתכם. אתם מכירים את האמרה. אני רואה את המצוקה. אהבה זה ריחוק, ריחוק זאת אהבה.
In other news, Jews around the world are preparing to celebrate this weekend as the Shavuot holiday begins Thursday night. So make room in your fridge because this holiday is especially delicious. Tracy Alexander reports.
Cheese, cream, yogurt. Israelis are stocking up on dairy products ahead of the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. The tradition celebrates the completion of 7 weeks since Passover and coincides with the date that Jews believe God handed down the Torah at Mount Sinai to Moses and the Jewish people, more than 3,300 years ago. In Israel, kibbutzim around the country come alive. Since arriving in the Holy Land at the beginning of the 20th century, Jews living in these communities have marked the day with festive celebrations, dressed in white and celebrating nature's harvest. That's because it was the beginning of summer when the chalutzim, or Jewish pioneers, arrived in Israel and began to rebuild their homeland. And at that time, the harvest was in full swing. So for them, the custom has taken on a new meaning. New babies are celebrated along with the fresh crops, but these images are unique to these communities in Israel. Across the rest of the country, feasting on dairy products like cheesecake, for example, is just one of the ways the holy day is marked, seeing demand for milky treats skyrocketing before the festival in recent years. Those who observe the holiday will also stay up all night reading the Torah and hearing the 10 Commandments read, as part of renewing a Jew's commitment to God. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.